Just wanted to tell you there's a few head. I don't know. There's only like 4 right up here by the gate. That might be all the family. Take a ride?
I think so.
This program is brought to you in part through a grant from Humanities Kansas. Humanities Kansas connects Kansans with stories, ideas, and each other to strengthen our communities. Additional funding has been provided by Richard Porter and Porter Cattle Company and by SEK Co-op, the Nature Conservancy in Kansas, and these family-owned ranching operations based in Greenwood County, Kansas.
It's an oasis on the prairie. Around 85% of Greenwood County is prairie. These ranchers know the value of the grasslands in Greenwood County and across the Flint Hills, and they want to preserve it. People claim that it's the most endangered ecosystem in the world. You know, we hear a lot about the Amazon rainforest and how endangered it is, but if you look at the numbers, tallgrass prairie is more endangered than even the Amazon rainforest because it's originally spanned from eastern Kansas all the way up into Iowa, Illinois, down into Missouri. So it was this large span of tallgrass prairie. Farming practices, urban areas, you know, chipped away at that tallgrass prairie, and now 4% of that remains, and nearly 90% of that remains right here in the Flint Hills area. And so this area is really important for tallgrass prairie. Tall grasses like big bluestem, Indian grass, switchgrass, side oats grama, those are species structurally that grow tall. And so these tallgrass species produce a lot of forage for livestock.
I have helped ship cattle, yearling cattle, who gain weight extremely rapidly, eating nothing but grass, bluestem grass. I have helped ship cattle that gained almost 4 pounds a day, eating nothing but grass.
The foremost authority on cattle culture in the Flint Hills of Kansas for many years, Jim Hoy grew up herding cattle. We spoke with him just a few weeks before he passed on in February of 2025. He filled us in on the practice of bringing cattle into Greenwood County from places like Texas.
I know that the first Texas cattle I'm aware of that were brought in to Greenwood County, 1868. Abilene as a cow town opens in 1867. 1 year later, there's a bunch of cattle being driven up from Texas. They get into southern Butler County. They split the herd. Half of them go to market in Abilene. Half are taken over to Fall River in Greenwood County to pasture there until the next year. So I know that as early as 1868, Texas cattle are being brought into the Flint Hills for pasturing.
By 1868, local settlers were already raising cattle in Greenwood County, grazing them out on the open range. They were concerned that the cattle coming up from the south were bringing disease with them, as was reported in the Eureka Herald.
August 21st, 1868. Mrs. Hitchcock, residing a few miles south of here, has lost within a few days 7 fine cattle. Several others have cattle sick and likely to die. The disease was communicated by a few Texas cattle supposed to have strayed near our southern border.
They called it Texas fever, a disease that often proved fatal. It was quite alarming to local residents. By the fall of 1868, people began to get more organized in their opposition. The Eureka Herald published notice of a grand rally focusing on the subject of Texas cattle.
At a meeting of the citizens of Eureka and vicinity, remarks were made by several persons present showing the necessity of preventing any and all Texas cattle from being driven into and through the county, there being no alternative but to keep such stock out altogether or surrender the country to them.
The country was not surrendered to the cattle from Texas, but neither were they kept out. As railroads were constructed throughout the region, beginning in the 1870s, the long trail drives eventually gave way to shipment by rail, a means of transport that lasted for several decades.
When I was a kid, the cattle all came up from Texas in trains. They'd come up in mid-April, throughout April, and they'd come up by the railroad car. Bunches of them, Santa Fe, Missouri Pacific, and bring carloads and carloads of those 2-year-old Texas steers. And some of them were sick, some of them were just in terrible shape, but by the time they had got out to the grass and could eat a little grass, they would gain their health quickly and gain weight exceedingly quickly.
Although the nutrient-rich grasses had the ability to help travel-stressed cattle bounce back quickly, concerns about the introduction of disease persisted. As the Leavenworth Times reported in May of 1892, a new protective association was formed in Greenwood County to represent the interests of local cattlemen. The following January, the Democratic Messenger of Eureka reported on a meeting of the Greenwood County Cattlemen's Association.
On motion of Captain Nye, a resolution was carried instructing the chairman to prepare a memorial setting forth the importance of our stock industry, our danger from infection, and petitioning His Excellency the Governor of Kansas for such recognition of our interest and claims as best the situation could afford.
At a meeting of the Cattlemen's Association in March of 1894, it commended the prompt action of a government inspector enforcing a quarantine of cattle coming up from what it called the infectious country to the south. And at its annual meeting the following March, as reported in the Topeka State Journal, it adopted resolutions instructing its officers and inspectors to keep a careful watch of cattle shipped in to see that they are not infected with Texas fever. This fever was spread by ticks, and eventually it became more commonplace for cattle to be immersed in a bath that killed the ticks and other parasites before the cattle were driven onward from the loading pens at the railroad. A former president of the Greenwood County Cattlemen's Association, Wayne Bailey, and his wife Marcia recall witnessing the action at the dipping vat by where they grew up near Matfield Green in a neighboring county.
Matfield was the only depot and stockyard that had a dipping vat. And so when them cattle come in, big old horns on them, and they'd tip them, then they'd run through the dipping vat to kill the scabies and stuff.
In fact, the old dipping vat is still over there at Matfield. It is still there.
The ramp started in there and then it just straight down where they had to go down. Then there's walkways on both sides where they had some forks, and they'd push them steers down and dunk them 3 times before they got the other side. On the other side, it was a long slope, and where they'd swim over there, and then they'd get bottom, and then they just walk up out of it. Of course, we was little kids. We didn't get to do that. We'd been in the way anyhow. But
The Baileys and a number of other families connected to the Greenwood County Cattlemen's Association shared their stories and insights with us as the organization approached the centennial of its annual celebration called Cattlemen's Day.
It's hard for me to believe this will be 100 years for the Cattlemen's, because we had floats in it for 4-H for, it seemed like years. And when the kids were little and we weren't involved in 4-H, we were always riding a horse in the parade in Eureka, you know. That was just the one weekend. Hey, that was Cattlemen's weekend. Everybody was gonna come to it.
We never had to work on Cattlemen's Day. So that's the level of importance. We never had to work on Cattlemen's Day.
Heather Huntington Fees grew up on a ranch near Eureka and moved back to Greenwood County to take up ranching again after working for a number of years as a development director for a community college. She used her grant writing skills to assist the Greenwood Preservation Society with fundraising for the renovation of the historic Greenwood Hotel in downtown Eureka.
And that is actually part of, the Greenwood Hotel is actually part of Cattlemen's history, because the building, the original building, was brick, built in 1883, had a grand opening. At that point in time, we were taking cattle to Kansas City because that's where the buyers were, was at the stockyards in Kansas City. Well, the cattle were so good in Greenwood County that the buyers would actually take the train and come to Greenwood County. So legacy says that $1 billion, with a B, $1 billion worth of cattle traded hands in the lobby of the Greenwood Hotel. And when they built onto the hotel, they did the stucco, which we kind of believe is they were replicating the plaza downtown in Kansas City with that Spanish Renaissance look. So when they did that, they decided to have a big party in 1926. So the party was such a great success, and at that point, the Cattlemen had dug in deep there. That was their spot, if you will. And so that's how Cattlemen's Day started, was in 1926 with that party they had at the Greenwood Hotel.
Although the Greenwood Hotel served as party central for the gathering, the dinner was served in the basement of a local church, featuring what was described as a big grass-fed steer. A special train brought guests in from Kansas City, including former presidents of the Kansas City Livestock Exchange and officials of the Santa Fe, Missouri Pacific, and Rock Island Railroads. The presence of the railway men reflected the importance they placed on the relationship they had with those who shipped cattle. There had been times in the past when the Cattlemen's Association had taken issue with the rates charged by the railroads and pressed them for more affordable service. But for several decades, cattle were brought in by rail and shipped out by rail, primarily to stockyards in Kansas City. Erlene Huntington, Heather's mother, recalls how her family shipped cattle to market.
My dad would feed out a load of fat cattle every year, and then they were put in a boxcar and they were sent to Kansas City. And if you shipped a load of cattle, someone could ride in the caboose at no charge. And so my dad's brother would go to the yards up there in Kansas City, and then of course there would be one of the commission men that would receive them and be the go-between and marketing them to whatever packer they were to go to. And then my uncle would get back home by catching a ride on some other freight train's caboose to get back to Eureka. But I'm thinking, wow, nobody ships cattle on a train anymore.
Trucks started taking over from trains in the 1950s and 60s. Large tractor trailers now transport most of the cattle shipped in and out of the hills. In the spring, the first stop for cattle trucked in from places as far away as Florida is usually a large scale such as this one, operated by the Collins family in Hamilton, Kansas.
We put the scales in, I believe, in 2012. They're 80-foot truck scales. We weigh a lot of grass cattle in April, and then we weigh them out in July and August for a fee. We do it as a for-profit business, but it's helped us when we turn cattle out. We know what they weigh. We know what we have an exact figure, what they're gaining, how the cattle are doing, and so on.
Like many others in Greenwood County, the Collins Cattle Company functions as a custom grazing operation.
We buy some cattle of our own and background them in the wintertime, but the main focus of our operation is custom grazing. It's kind of a unique Flint Hills situation. We're the middleman between the cattle owner and the landowner. We rent the pasture, bring the cattle in for a set price. We take care of them, we take care of the pasture. We then ship the cattle at the end of the growing season, and that's kind of the gist of it.
Today, I'd say we are maybe running a few more of our cattle that we actually own.
Mike Collins, Glenn's father, grew up near Emporia, where his father was a veterinarian. He moved to Greenwood County in the late 1970s.
I was extremely fortunate to land here in an era that I guess you could say was kind of tough for agriculture. In the 80s, it was a really tough time and people were selling out and had a lot of debt and interest was high and all that stuff. Well, when you start out and don't have anything, you can't go down much farther. It was fairly easy to, well, I wouldn't say easy, but it was easier to obtain land to rent and to run when everybody was wanting out for any reason they could get. And so we were able to step in, and we didn't have the cattle to fill it that we owned, but we could find other people that could do it, and we just kept working and working on that. We gradually were fortunate enough to be able to purchase some, but most of our land was rented from absentee landowners that we were able to work with, and some of those we've had some fairly long-term relationships with.
This has been going on in this part of the Flint Hills for many years, and I hope to see it for many more. But to do that, you've got to take care of things. You've got to take care of the grass and do it right. In many cases, woody encroachment is all across Kansas. It's everywhere. But through fire and grazing, we try to take good care of things and keep the native tallgrass prairie the way it is.
One of the practices, the important practice that is being utilized in the Flint Hills, and especially here in Greenwood County, is prescribed burning. Burning sometimes stokes fear in people's lives because fire is bad. But here we have a burn culture that we recognize that burning is important to maintain that tallgrass prairie, make sure that the trees stay out, make sure other weeds don't come in and infest the prairie and take over. And so that prescribed burning is really a cultural event that you see here in early April. What it does is it regenerates, it takes all that old growth off. You know, that top growth is over the winter is dormant, it's dead, there's nothing there. And so if we take that off, then we can get sunlight to that ground, we can heat that ground up and get that flush of new growth. The growth point on that grass is just below that soil surface. And so that grass is naturally adapted to fire. Trees, on the other hand, are not, because their growth point is above the ground. And if we can take that fire, burn off the growth point of those trees, but not burn off the growth point of that grass, then we're going to favor the grass versus the trees, and that's our goal. And it's fun to watch Greenwood County producers, you know, because if you're not familiar with prescribed burning or familiar with burning at all, you know, coming in spring and watching them conduct a prescribed burn, it is truly amazing because they have skill. They have an incredible amount of skill to be able to take acres and acres of land and light a fire safely and conduct that prescribed burn. And the folks here in Greenwood County with this burn culture have the experience to conduct a safe prescribed burn.
I think Dad and I are both the burning is one of the most important things we do for maintaining our grasslands, but it's a dreaded time of year, unfortunately, for for us, and the fact that it's just, there's so much to do in such a little bit of time, and there's so many risks involved, and we want to make sure that we do it safely. We're watching the weather. The new aspects that we used to not think about is, we're looking at what, even not just the local highway, whether the smoke's going across or keeping the fire off the neighbors. We're also looking, is that smoke going to hit Wichita, or is it going to hit Topeka? And so just so many factors.
Here in the Flint Hills and in the grasslands, when we burn, we don't want to have people suffer because of us, but we want everybody to understand that this is an important tool that we have out here on the prairie to maintain a prairie, because if we don't, then we're going to have trees like cedar trees come in, and you look at the pollen amount of eastern red cedar, that's significant as well. When people get allergies in this early spring, likely it's from cedar pollen blowing up from Oklahoma that has a significant infestation of eastern red cedar.
Referred to as the Green Glacier, the invasion of cedar trees and other woody vegetation will overtake the grasslands unless ranchers continue to use tools such as prescribed burning to keep it in check. Even though he finds it somewhat stressful, Dilts Lindemood was well aware he'd have to deal with it when he decided to continue his family's ranching tradition, a decision he made early on before he had any thought about becoming a banker as well.
I don't know at what point in time I knew that, but I certainly in high school and when I went off to K-State, I had full intentions of coming home and ranching with Dad. And really it wasn't until just before I graduated from K-State that local bank approached me and said, we'd like you to come to work for us. And they offered quite a bit of flexibility, and they offered a regular paycheck, which sounded better than what I expected on the ranch. And so that's been over 30 years ago. I'm still at the bank and I'm still working for Dad and the ranch. So
my granddad owned 40 acres right here, and when he got old, him and his wife moved to town, and my dad bought the 40 acres and he added to it, but I'm basically the fourth generation on this original 40 acres.
Jack Lindemood never had any interest in leaving the family's ranch. He started acquiring land of his own as soon as he could.
Got out of high school and bought 80 acres the week I graduated. I joined my dad's place here. It cost $100 an acre. And I was making 90 cents an hour working for my dad and the neighbors. And it took a long time to pay for 80 acres. I raised hogs when I first started in that old place I bought, an old chicken house, and I tore down a couple buildings and made panels, and I raised feeder pigs. And you could sell feeder pigs, every month, and that's what we lived off of to pay for the place. And we did it up until Dad started getting older, and I started branching into the cattle business and got out of the hog business.
Over the years, Jack's cattle business has grown significantly as he's acquired more land and built up his cow herds, which he's developed to provide annual calf crops while also regularly purchasing additional cattle for seasonal grazing.
Angus cows, and in recent years we used some Charolais bulls to have crossbred calves. All the cows are home raised. They all was born and raised right here for 4 or 5 generations.
Accompanied by his daughter-in-law, Jamie Lindemood, Jack also reflected on the changes he's witnessed over the years as he and his family expanded their ranching operation. He spoke of the reduction in the number of families living out here.
All of this country down through here, when my grandpa and my dad and me have kept buying it and putting it together, 40-acre homesteads everywhere. I bet we've, not exaggerating, filled 100 hand-dug water wells since we've started accumulating it,
Even from when I was a child, basically all the neighbors I remember closest there's no longer operators there. We operate that land. I mean, so what was common to people raise their family on an 80 or a quarter, and then maybe they still had a job or whatever, but it takes a bigger and bigger operation to support a household or a family. With technology, you're able to do more. I mean, round bales, one person can put up a heck of a lot more hay than when we had little square bales, and we can feed a lot more cattle, and just our equipment in general.
Increasing costs have also been a significant factor in this trend, the cost of land as well as of equipment. Compared to the price he first paid for land, Jack referenced pasture land currently on the market for 35 times as much.
$3,500 an acre. And I think $1,750 is the most I've paid for land in the later years, but it just keeps getting higher. And most of the reasons this piece of land they want $3,500 for, somebody from a city will buy it for deer hunting and turkey hunting.
It seems like even in the last decade, there's been more and more interest from outsiders from a recreational standpoint, whether it's hunting and fishing, or even during COVID, experienced quite a bit of, you could tell people just wanted an area out of town where they could get away from people, I think. And so that's created additional challenges for producers, and they have to look at that land from the standpoint of, how much can I make grazing that land, or how much can I make farming that land.
I think now that number, that percentage of what it's valued versus what you can actually make it produce is just to the point where it just doesn't. It's really hard to make that make sense.
Brant Spoon is a sixth-generation farmer in Greenwood County. With his wife, Natalie, and their boys, Cooper, Wyatt, Truett, and Landry, the family manages RBD Cattle Company. They also run their own backgrounding yard and pasture cattle. Natalie and the boys are regularly involved.
Honored by Kansas Farm Bureau as the head of its Farm Family of the Year in 2022, Brant Spoon took over as president of the Greenwood County Cattlemen's Association in the spring of 2025, succeeding Jared Seeley in that role. He pointed to the increasing cost of land as a perennial problem for farmers and ranchers.
I would say that was one of our major issues, and I'm not pointing at absentee landowners as an issue, but I was going to say, as far as affecting our industry and this inability for ground to be cash flowed or bought by farmers and ranchers that are running that ground is definitely a major hindrance. It causes a lot of issues, and I don't foresee that issue improving, but that definitely affects the industry and the people in this area, I would say.
Looking back through the archives in preparation for the centennial of the Cattlemen's Association's annual banquet, Jared Seeley noted that it's dealt with a number of different issues over the years.
Throughout history, the association has played multiple roles, but the association dealt with tick fever and turned a lot of herds around or redirected them to keep them out of the county. Then they battled other things like railroads, price gouging of the railroads whenever all these cattle were hauled in and out via rail car. Right now, our biggest deal is supporting our youth in agriculture. We put on the annual livestock, 4-H livestock sale, 4-H and FFA, and we generate a lot of money to go to premiums. We give 4 or 5 scholarships, and we'll give those scholarships every year. We work with the Cattlemen's Association, and their main priority is education.
The Cattlemen's focus has always been education.
A recent president of the Cattlemen's Association, Jamie Lindemuth, has been actively involved in its educational efforts.
I grew up in Wichita. My dad actually grew up on a small dairy farm outside of Kingman, Kansas. So we would visit there on the weekends, but my connection to agriculture was pretty limited. And then I met my husband and moved out here.
She's now lived here long enough to be able to share what she's learned with others, and she had a thought about how that might be done. She shared her idea with Matt Prairie, a local rancher who at the time was coming into his term as president of the Kansas Livestock Association.
And I said, hey Matt, I have this great idea. I would really like to bring a busload of people out to the sticks and show them agriculture, and I'd really like to do it with you all. Would you be willing to do that with us? And he was like, yeah, I think I would. That was like mid-February, I think, when we did that, and we hosted our first day at the ranch like April the 15th.
That was really kind of her idea, was to bring a busload of people from Wichita to our ranches, and so we went to her and Dilsa's ranch and our ranch just to educate them, you know, let them see what was happening on a day-to-day basis and how we treat our animals, and went into a little bit of information about farming. And so that started about 2016. We had the first one.
Did a small burn, went over to Perrier's place, worked some cattle. We went all out on all of the different things and just educated them the whole way. And on the way home, opened a lot of bottles of wine. And the questions just started flowing, and it was great. It was a great day.
Then that kind of evolved into more of a social media type of education, because she started posting about Day at the Ranch and then started doing it more as an education, more on a weekly basis. And then she involved myself and 2 other women at the time, and we started posting weekly, you know, taking turns. I would take a week, Jamie would take a week, and so on, to just try to get some of those myths dispelled and educate people a little bit more about our lifestyle.
Long before Day at the Ranch brought folks from Wichita to Greenwood County, a different event called Day at the Farm began bringing local second graders out to the ranch of Preston and Gina Beeman each fall.
And we involve the FFA chapters in the county too, so the kids get to come out here and have a day full of hands-on learning about animals and crops and equipment and whatever we can come up with to explain to them. We have 15, 20 different stations that will take them throughout the day, and wagon ride in the afternoon so that they can kind of go out and see the different pastures that we have. And then we take them on a nature walk where they can go across the creek and then walk out through the trees. And we keep them busy, so when they leave in the afternoon, their bus ride's a lot quieter because they're pretty worn out. But it's been really good. We've had lots of older kids that have come up to us and said, you know, I was at your house when I was a second grader, and that was my favorite day of the year, you know, so it's made an impact.
Although this day on the farm is organized primarily by the County Farm Bureau, Gina notes that the Cattlemen's organization also participates.
Yeah, Cattlemen's a good thing to have in our county. It's pretty special too. There are the Cattlemen, or the cowbells is how it kind of actually started way back when. My mother-in-law and some of her friends, I think that's how they were known, was the cowbells, and it was mostly a social gathering. But now we've taken it to another level where they are getting into the schools and taking the kids on field trips, like to the sale barn or whatever it might be, you know, to help them, you know, understand. You're in Greenwood County, our primary business is producing beef. You guys need to understand that, you know, what the livelihood around here is and why it's so special to Greenwood County. So Cattlemen do a really good job of getting those kids to understand that.
While her mother-in-law was active in the cowbells, Gina's father-in-law was an active member of the Cattlemen's Association, serving as president of the organization in 1981. Preston, who twice served as president, recalls the last meeting he attended with his dad.
And actually the last meeting before Dad passed away, there were 3 generations there. My dad, myself, and my son, he would have been in high school, college. Anyway, there was 3 generations of us at that last spring meeting of the Cattlemen's in 2014, which was right before Dad would have passed away. So that was pretty cool. So someday Reed moves back, well, maybe he'll be a Cattlemen's member and we can do that all again.
Preston says his son Reed currently runs a feed mill in Iowa, but perhaps someday he'll want to return to the ranch. Likewise, daughter Tessa has a good job working with the State Department of Agriculture, but she returns to the ranch frequently to help with cattle drives and such. Youngest daughter Georgia also helps out with the animals. The choices this generation will make bear significant consequences for the future of the Cattlemen's Association.
I don't think I'm old, but we're getting older, and there's not as many younger, the generation younger than me coming back to the county, so we're losing our members. Even possible members are just not as many out there anymore. And that's the other, I guess we're trying to build and expand to bring our next generation back, but it's also hard for them to leave those jobs that make the kind of money they're making, because I've we won't do that. It's more about the lifestyle. I mean, it's a good living, we're fine, but it's more about the lifestyle and raising your kids in this setting than making money. Money's nice, but it's also nice to get up and get on a horse every day and ride and go do what you want to do. And every day's, we plan every day. We know what we're going to do this week. We have an idea, but it never ends that way. We know every morning we've got to feed and take care of the cattle, and then we might plan on going building fence this afternoon, but you just don't know. Things change, things happen, and I guess that's part of the fun, so to speak, for me. Is every day's different. Every day there's always something new, some new challenge. Whether it's just cattle, horses, always something. So always something.
Anytime you can leave home and then come back, I think you gain a better perspective and sense of place for where you end up and where you were from, but you're also able to see things, I guess, from a lot different perspectives than if you had never left.
Matt Prairie was among those who left Greenwood County after growing up on the family's ranch here, deciding to return several years later, following jobs with the Pennsylvania Beef Council and the American Angus Association. The fifth generation of a family operation called Dale Banks Angus, he and his wife Amy went to work with his parents, Tom and Carolyn, who were honored as Grand Marshals of the Cattlemen's Day Parade in 2024.
Our operation is a registered seed stock, registered cow-calf herd Angus cattle, and which means that we are focused not on just raising calves that will then go into the beef supply chain, but we're focused on raising calves that will then be genetics either for our herd, if we use them as replacement heifers and cows, or the main cash crop, I guess, would be selling bulls to neighboring ranches and really across the United States, and especially in this region.
Along with a couple of full-time hired hands and neighbors who help occasionally, it's really a family affair on this ranch, as on many others.
Amy and I have 5 kids that are here with us, and they range in age from young Hope, who's 6, to Ava, who just graduated from K-State and will be going out on her own, who's 21, 22 by the time this comes out probably. And so when we can, we use them as often and as much as we can, and they enjoy it. Dad's 80 years old, but still is out helping whenever he can, and does a lot of the office work and record keeping and finances and things like that. So yeah, it's definitely a team approach.
When they transition to helping and working, it's not easy. It's not easy to learn how to ride a horse in general, and then to work with cattle on top of that. But Matt's a good teacher, and they've learned a lot. And you can't really replace the day-to-day immersion that they get in just the circle of life and the reality of life, the hard work that life really takes. It's not always easy. There's always struggles, and they can see that on a weekly basis, and also how we overcome those struggles. And so just learning that value of hard work and persistence, and It's amazing when you live on a ranch. It's not just living here, it's really, you're immersed in it every day, and it's pretty amazing from day one what they pick up and what they learn.
There are lessons that people on farms and ranches across the nation learn about working together, figuring out how to help somebody else out when the neighbor needs a hand, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, we try to do as many things as we can on our own, just so that we can, optimize labor efficiency and everything else. But there's certain things like dragging calves and putting on a bull sale that it's all hands on deck, and sometimes a few extras. But yeah, there's no doubt about it. Ag, you spend a lot of time by yourself on a horse, in a pickup, on a tractor, whatever the case may be, doing certain tasks, but then the fun times are when everybody comes together and gets a big job done.
One big job in the fall pulls in some extra help to round up the cow herd and vaccinate their calves. Henry and Hannah Perrier were there to help, as well as Grandpa Tom.
We work with our vet to make sure and put a vaccination program and a herd health program together to keep those calves healthy, and the goal is to give them the right amount of vaccine so that we don't ever have to use a treatment, what I would call an antibiotic treatment. It still happens occasionally, and when that calf needs to get better, we're going to give them a shot of antibiotic to make sure and help them through that. But yeah, the goal is to not have to do that any more often than we must. That day, and most of those month to 2 month old calves, when we work them the first time, they're getting 3 vaccines. A couple of them are intranasal vaccines that would basically help protect them against different cold viruses type, and then a clostridial shot, and then we give them a dewormer or parasiticide that would help defend them, and that actually sets them up, I think, and our vet thinks, to respond to any health challenges, and we'll do that again at weaning time. Similar vaccinations, a little different type of parasiticide, but that's the goal, is to just allow that calf to have the right amount of vaccinations so they don't have to succumb to or even be treated for any infections down the line. Dad always used to say, Mom and Dad used to say, that we raise cows and we raise grass and we raise crops, but the most important one is the kids. And I would take it a step further and say, as much as these Angus bulls may be worth on the Saturday before Thanksgiving, or as much as these feeder cattle may be worth going across the scale sale barn these days, they pale in comparison to the value of rural youth. And that is by far and away the highest valued commodity or product that we produce on these farms and ranches, is the kids.
You want to get everything set up so that, they've got a chance. And that's what my folks did. They made good decisions and the right choices and set this up for us to follow into. And I hope that we can do the same.
Mike Wiggins and his wife Renee have continued a family ranching legacy that stretches back to when his great-grandfather settled in the area following the Civil War. Their son Latham is now part of the operation, as is their daughter Lindy and her husband Justin.
I think if you'd have asked me the day I graduated high school if I'd ever moved back here, I'd have told you were crazy and that I wasn't ever coming back. I didn't go that far away, but I got far enough away that by the time I was married and we were ready to settle down and have kids, there wasn't really ever any question that I didn't want to do it anywhere else but here.
Now they have 2 kids and live in a new home they built nearby. With degrees in agricultural communications from Oklahoma State University, Lindy has formed her own marketing company.
I tell people when they ask me about starting my business, I can't really say that I just jumped off and did it with no safety net, because that was one of the main reasons we moved home, because I knew that even if I failed, it would be okay. But thankfully, you know, it just really took off. I found a lot of small and rural businesses that needed help on the marketing front, and it's another one of those things where there was a lot of hustle and hard work happening in the background, but puzzle pieces just kind of fell into place.
Lindy's communication skills have created a social media presence for the Wiggins Ranch and another tool for marketing their beef. She's pulled her father into it, asking him to record some of his day-to-day experiences on the ranch.
Now that I got a cell phone and I kind of know how to run it, I can video a little bit if we're out doing something, and if I see a cool picture or set something up just right, I'll take a little video and then I send it to Lindy, and then she does magic with it, and never know what's going to happen after that. But it makes for a lot of interesting conversation, if nothing else, you know. So
I think there's a certain amount of romanticism around, especially the beef industry and the cowboy and the cattle rancher and all of that. And so I think letting people embrace that and see, you know, where at least that portion of their daily food is coming from is crucial. And that's what we're trying to help people do, whether it's the beef industry or anything else. Telling the story of how your product got to the consumer is what people are looking for.
With 3 families to support, the ranching operation has expanded to encompass more cattle and pasture land. Like many others here, it involves taking care of land and cattle owned by people outside of the Flint Hills.
we got cattle for a guy in Oklahoma. I grazed a lot of cattle for some guys down in southeast Kansas. Taking care of a lot of cattle for a fella out of Nebraska he's bought quite a lot of acreage down in this part of the country, and he sends his own cattle down here and we take care of them, and he owns the grass and he owns the cattle, and we just kind of take care of it and manage it for him. We've got several customers, you know, that we take care of stuff for. Plus take care of all of our own stuff. We run several hundred head of cows of our own, and it's pretty busy around here. It seems like it's non-stop sometimes.
Although most of the revenue comes from the large numbers of cattle that are raised and grazed here, then shipped out, the Wiggins Ranch has also moved into some retail sales direct to consumers.
Even when Mom and Dad were alive, we would sell, we had this little feedlot up here, and we'd keep a few cattle on feed, and we'd sell a half a beef to somebody or a whole beef to somebody we knew, or they'd call and say, I need a whole beef or half a beef or whatever. And then we started having people say, well, we want some of your beef, but we don't have a freezer and we don't have the cash flow to buy a half a beef or a whole beef or even a quarter. And so we kicked around the idea of maybe doing some retail sales. And that's when Renee jumped on that deal and started putting together some bundles, and people can come here to the house and we keep freezers full of beef up there frozen, and so when somebody says, well, we just want a bundle of steaks and some hamburger or something, then Renee can put that together for them.
She packages it up kind of seasonally. In the summertime we focus a lot on things that can go on the grill, and in the fall and the winter we do campaigns around crock pot season and different things like that, and so it makes it affordable for people to buy local.
Mutual contact got us in touch with an Italian restaurant in Wichita. They buy our beef exclusively. He'll buy a whole beef once a month.
All of their beef dishes are made with Wiggins Ranch beef, so that's pretty cool. We've been able to go over there and see the Wiggins Ranch on their menu, which is fun. Kind of get the celebrity treatment when we go over there, when they know who we are, and that's pretty cool.
The consumer appeal of locally produced food has opened the way for another local ranch that also provides beef to restaurants, as well as through its own market in Eureka. Salt Creek Farm emerged from the aspirations of Jay and Sarah Shivers. Jay grew up in rural Texas, while Sarah was raised on her family's ranch in Greenwood County.
I think a part of me always knew I would end up here. I have an older brother, but Ag was never his thing, but I was always Dad's kind of little shadow. I rode around all the time with him, always helped with the cattle. I always had an interest in it. I showed sheep and cattle growing up in 4-H and had a few grand champion steers at our county fair, and I always knew it was something special to me. When I went to K-State for college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. After I'd been there a semester or so, I decided that, I was like, oh, I really want to go into ag. And I came home and I talked to my parents. I was like, I really want to switch my major to ag. And my dad talked me out of it. He said, no, you don't want to do that. You don't want to come back here. You know, this is a hard life. He wanted something better, what he perceived as better for me, because farming and ranching can be a hard life. So I did not major in ag. I ended up with a degree in family studies, and I worked in nonprofits, and then I moved to North Texas to get my graduate degree at University of North Texas, which is where I met my husband.
I grew up in the country in Texas. I enjoyed playing outside, riding my bike, playing in the dirt. You know, we had a dog, and I showed lambs for a bit in FFA, but we didn't do agriculture. We didn't have enough land for that. We didn't do animals. I enjoy being around animals, and I enjoyed being in the country, but no. It was a learning experience. But you know, when I met Sarah and she said, well, my family ranches in Kansas, I thought, wow, that's cool. I don't know anybody that ranches or farms, and I do think it's fascinating. So that's kind of a cool start to meeting Sarah and that topic. And I don't know if she's had that response from other people, but I was pretty cool. I just thought that was so cool.
They say that they started dreaming about moving to Kansas on their honeymoon, but it wasn't until after their first child was born that it started becoming a reality, after Jay was offered a city planning position in El Dorado, not so far from Eureka.
So once Jay got the job offer, we called Mom and Dad and we said, what would you think about us moving back and me ranching with Dad? And they were just kind of stunned into silence. They didn't really know what to say. But, you know, they were excited for us to come back and very supportive. And so we lived in El Dorado for about 2 years while we were building this house here on the ranch. And I was working with Dad. And then in about, what year did we start? I think it was 2017 is when we officially started Salt Creek Farm. We were full of high hopes, and we thought we're gonna start this thing. Jay built out the website himself, and we thought, oh, we're gonna be able to sell quarters, halves, wholes, really easy, no problem. And it was a lot tougher than we thought it would be.
Part of starting a business, Sarah and I have found, is that we have to work with our strengths. And a small business, if you want to be profitable in the long run, you can't always hire out every single thing you need. And so it's so important to figure out what you can do in-house. You know, obviously Sarah was already great with cattle and knew that part that I didn't, but I realized I can work with websites, I can work with the accounting part, I can do all these things. And little by little, Sarah's great with marketing and social media and all these things. And we just figured out what could we both do well and did our best at doing that and helped get our business off the ground without outsourcing all these different areas that can get so expensive in a really small business. You're just trying to get off the ground.
In launching this business, Jay and Sarah were intent upon following her father's advice to find a more profitable way to market their cattle. I heard that he'd begun building back in the mid-'70s with the creation of Rafter S Ranch.
Rafter S is a cow-calf operation. All the animals that we use in Salt Creek Farm are raised here on the ranch, and we finish the calves here on the ranch ourselves, and then we take them to a locker, the Bronson locker, where they're processed for us under our label.
A cousin who was opening a brewery in Kansas City started serving their beef, and that opened the door for them to develop relationships with a number of chefs in the city. They were quickly expanding their restaurant network when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, and orders were immediately canceled.
But because we had cattle in the pipeline on feed already, because we already had the locker dates booked for the rest of the year, because we already had the website built out, when the grocery store shelves started getting empty and people really started turning towards local farms and local ranchers to try to get their beef, their vegetables, things like that, we were in a position to meet that need. And even when restaurants started opening back up in the summer, they were at much reduced rates. People weren't eating out as much. And so it helped us balance our business as the restaurants came back and, raised our retail things and really opened the door for what we would do a few years later, which was opening up a retail store.
Although it wasn't in their plans, they decided to test the market for a retail outlet when a small rental space opened up in downtown Eureka.
So we took a month to build out the space we wanted it, and then we opened on Cattlemen's Day in 2022. And that was our first day in our market there. But after we'd been there about a year, we knew we wanted a bigger space. And then we opened at our new building in end of March of 2025. And we were blown away by the community support. This community has just been amazing in their support and how they've shown up for us. And it's been a great experience.
The support of the local community was also a significant factor when something else happened that wasn't part of the plan. The unexpected death of Sarah's father, Don Stevens, in the spring of 2023.
And unfortunately, you always think you've got time. He thought he was going to have time to teach us the machinery and teach us everything that we would need to know, and we didn't. And so we are really fortunate that we have friends and family that were willing to come and help us and step up. And I had a group of female friends who came down and they said, all right, you pick a weekend, we're going to help you work, because we were in the middle of working all of our spring cattle. All the fall calves needed to be weaned, the spring calves needed to be worked, castrated, vaccinated, all that stuff. And so one day, 4 or 5 of them came down and we processed some of our fall calves. And that just meant so much to me, that they took time out of their days and coordinated it, and actually they pushed for it, because I was very much like, oh, we're fine, we'll take care of it, we're fine. And they insisted and said, nope, we're doing this, we're coming, whether you like it or not, we're gonna be there. And that's part of this community, of the people being willing to be there to step up and help.
The year Sarah's father died, they faced another unexpected challenge, as the summer rains didn't manifest and they had to start hauling water to their cattle herds.
That drought was so terrible. I blocked it out of my mind. But yeah, little by little, we got 1 stock tank and a small water tank, and then a few more, and then a water trailer. And we just kept going. It's got to storm sometime. Storm season can last, somewhat into the fall, but we kept adding stock tanks and ponds kept going dry, and we were hauling more and more water.
And we did end up selling some cattle.
We sold a little bit, and we were trying so hard to hang on. And I think we had set this date around the end of the year where we kind of said, all right, we can keep water in the stock tanks till about the end of the year, and then it's going to get cold, and I don't think we can keep them from freezing over. And so we just said, let's make it to the end of the year, and if there's just no drought relief, then we're just going to have to cut back on our livestock. And I think it was Christmas Eve. I call it the Christmas Eve miracle. I don't know how many inches of rain we got, but the ponds filled up and we stopped hauling, and I think we were very close. I don't even want to think about how close we were to.
It was very close to selling.
And thinking about how long it would have taken to build back. It was such a stressful time. This year it's been so wet this spring, and every time we talk about hay delays, we add in, but I'm so thankful that it's July and the ponds are full. Hope we never see a drought like that again.
Yeah, and it was a drought that I'd say the old timers, they would say, we've never seen a drought this bad. The old timers say they've never, it was worst drought in 75 years, they said. And I knew if we could get through losing Dad and we could get through the drought, I thought we could make it through anything. That year was really our litmus test of what could we push through.
And we've said that a few times since then.
Yeah.
We survived that year, we can survive anything.
Yep.
They not only continue to survive, but to actually thrive. In addition to their success with Salt Creek Market, their sales to restaurants have rebounded, adding a few in Wichita, as well as servicing more than a dozen in Kansas City.
And one of our restaurants is right there at the stockyards. So I get to go to the stockyards every other week and get to see, that part of history is fun as well.
Sarah herself became part of history a few years ago when she became the first female to join the board of the Greenwood County Cattlemen's Association. She appreciates the connections it provides to other ranchers dealing with similar challenges. She and Jay were among those who assembled recently on the Collins Ranch for a field day focusing on watering issues.
Today we were looking at different watering systems that could help maybe spread out the grazing, maybe keep the cattle out of the ponds for a bit and allow them to drink out of other places. And a lot of it has to do with water quality. We're trying to keep the quality as good as we possibly can. One way is to fence them out of ponds and allow them to drink other locations.
Providing tanks down below those pond dams, fencing out that pond dam to exclude livestock from the actual pond itself, but provide that valuable water below in a tank. Or fencing it out and then adding a lane into that pond, and that lane is hardened with rock to where they can walk down, get a drink, and then get out. That's important. It's been shown in numerous studies that clean water is important for the health of those livestock. And if we can have good water, they're going to gain more weight if it's a yearling animal, or they're going to do better in their pregnancy if it's a cow. So that water is really important, and providing that clean water is critical to our livestock operation. Water quality is an important thing that we all want to be considerate of. And ranchers here in Greenwood County, the water source that we get for the city of Eureka and for much of Greenwood County is from one reservoir that's built way up in the hills, has not a single acre of cropland drainage into it. It's all grassland. And it's been noted as the cleanest water in Kansas. And so that is a testament to the grasslands of the Flint Hills and the grasslands of Greenwood County is how great they are at improving water quality.
Some of those who live out here still remember the days before many folks had running water in their homes. Wayne Bailey recalls earning some extra income by drilling water wells, employing his skill in witching with brass dowsing rods to find it.
I had a friend that found us a well drilling machine, cable tool, so I partnered up on a well drilling machine, and I drilled several wells around people needed done, and done my own witching. And they'd go, "Oh, hell, there ain't no water there. We're wasting my time." I believe there is. I saved a lot of people a lot of money by finding it.
Before they were married, while Wayne was serving in Vietnam, his parents depended upon Marcia and 3 other young women to help with the cattle. Although they were all used to having running water at home, it had yet to arrive in the Bailey household.
That was the one eye-opener for the 4 of us girls when we helped Durward, because they had the round tub that she put in the kitchen, and she'd pump buckets of water, and that's how we had to clean up after we'd work. You're dirty. That was how we took our baths, was in this tub.
They just saved Dad and Mom a lot of work and worries. And there wasn't anything Dad wouldn't bite off that he knew the girls couldn't take care of.
And then I was going to college also.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, I was going to K-State. So in the summertime, was helping down here, and then I'd take off from K-State to, shipping time to help ship and things like that.
Marcia admits that her primary reason for going to college was to join the K-State rodeo team, a sport that both she and Wayne enjoyed competing in through the years. Horses are still important to both of them, but they've also adapted to changing technology by making use of what they call side-by-sides.
And they are handy because you can throw fencing equipment in the back end. You can throw in your doctoring gun, So when you go through the pasture, you have everything. Everything you possibly need. Where if you're on a horse, like with us, we'd have to come home, call somebody to come help us. We need to go rope a steer. We need to drive them to the pens. We need some help. You know, where with the side-by-sides, take care of it right then and there. But you still can't, or we can't, do without a horse. There's just certain things you've still got to have a horse to do.
Wayne notes that grazing practices have also changed over the years.
Dad had cattlemen that we'd taken care of cattle over the years and years, and so they'd send the cattle up and we took care of them through the summer. And back then, the acreage of grazing was figured on 4 acres per head, not 2 or 3, and figured on 6 months grazing period.
April to October.
Not 90 days. And a lot of my cattle guys, the old timers, they've all died. But their grandkids, kids and grandkids, they're still in business and we're still taking care of them. So evidently we're doing something right. But it's changed so much, and we're just lucky that we was involved with the change. We're just lucky that we was where we are and still are.
And still able to do things. It may take us twice as long. It may take both of us to do a one-man job, but at the end of the day, we can say, no, we got it done.
Getting things done on the ranch also relies upon effective communication. This is another area in which ranch life has changed significantly, as Earlene Huntington explains, referencing her dearly departed husband, Clint.
And the other thing that has been transformational, I think, in a lot of ways, was cell phones. Clint was really into the first ones, and I'm sure the first one he had was, it looked like a box of Velveeta cheese. It was so big. And he lugged that thing around, you know. And now, not only do they provide communication, they're a regular set of encyclopedias for anybody that wants to use one that way. But I laughed and I said after we got cell phones, I never got dispatched to look for the truck that had gotten off the road and turned wrong direction and we didn't know where he was. I used to be, while they would be unloading one batch of cattle, I'd be looking for that truck that nobody knew where it was. Or I would be down at the truck stop cafe down here because they would have been told, stop at the cafe and somebody will lead you to the pasture. And so I would be down there and I wouldn't be the only one. There would be a dozen trucks parked down there waiting for somebody to come get them.
Earlene has seen quite a bit of change since she was a young girl on the family's farm, where she soon learned how to work with horses.
My early job would have been feeding the work horses, putting grain in their boxes, and as I got a little bit bigger, putting loose hay, prairie hay, in their mangers, and that was something I could do. Then when World War II came along and there really wasn't any help, I had the, quote, opportunity to go to the hayfield with a team of horses, and I was only 9 years old. We stacked hay, and my uncle, he always worked on the stack, but we had a hay stacker, which was used to elevate the load of hay to the top of the stack. And it was a stationary deal, but it had an ability to raise and then swing and then dump. And so I had to work my team carefully so that we didn't just throw the whole thing into a wreck. But anyway, as I say, my team was good. They knew the job as well or better than I did.
Earlene can also attest to the fact that rural electrification was slow to arrive in some parts of the county, as was the case with her family's farm.
They didn't get electricity until I was a sophomore in college. We were kind of on the end of the REA line. And the commercial provider of electricity was not interested in coming out where we were more sparsely located. So we didn't get REA at those farms out in there until that would have been in the 50s.
Erlene and Clint were married in 1956 after she finished her schooling and worked for a couple years as a county extension agent.
And Dad had a really cute story one time. Both my parents went to one-room schools. And he said the first time he remembered seeing my mom was all the one-room schools came together at Memorial Hall, and they had some kind of a little ceremony. It wasn't really 8th grade graduation, they said, but it was some sort of little ceremony, and he remembers seeing my mom for the first time. And they were both from Greenwood County, but up opposite sides of town. And isn't that funny that they were in 8th grade before they even saw each other? The world was different.
Clint was only 16 years old when his father died of cancer. Erlene suspects that he joined the Cattlemen's Association soon after because he found support there. He served as president of the organization in 1971, as Erlene played a leading role in the women's group.
I can remember the year I was president, we had the women's meeting and dinner, and we had 80 women there. And there were more people in the cattle business than there are today, because it's been a gradual consolidation. As I say, our population of the number of people involved in producing these cattle is so reduced.
As the number of people directly engaged in ranching has decreased over the years, the challenges facing those who remain have not. While ranchers fight the advance of cedar trees and woody vegetation with their prescribed burning practices, they also have to deal with the influx of invasive plants, such as Sericea lespedisa, which displace native grasses. They also have to remain vigilant for new diseases carried by ticks, as well as the return of menacing pests such as flesh-eating screwworms. And as the earth continues to heat up, they will likely encounter more extreme weather, including droughts, severe storms, and heat waves that can take a heavy toll on cattle. Still, young ranchers like Glenn Collins maintain a positive outlook.
I'm pretty optimistic. I think there's plenty of opportunity. You may have to work at it pretty hard to get some of that opportunity, but it's there. We're in a historic high for the cattle market, and that'll go down. But we're used to that. I think there's opportunity if you want to work at it. I'm optimistic about the future. I enjoy watching my contemporaries around Greenwood County, my peers. I enjoy watching them go, because there's some people that are really getting after it and working hard, and it's fun to watch them grow and be successful. And I think there's plenty of that to go around if you want to do it.
Glenn gets a unique perspective on what's happening in Greenwood County through a role he plays off the ranch, supplementing his income with a second job.
So in my particular case, I also serve as a Greenwood County Fire Chief. I joined the fire department when I came home from K-State in 2010, and it's something I really enjoyed. I actually went to work for the Kansas Forest Service as a wildland firefighter and traveled all around to wildland fires in the western U.S. I really enjoyed that. And when I came home, I wanted to be more involved with the fire department, and about that time our longtime chief had retired, and so I interviewed for that and got that job, and it's a blast. I really enjoy it. This is one of the bigger counties in the state, and with not very many people, and so it's an really interesting part of the world to do that in, because you get to see a lot of different things. From one end to the other is about 70 miles, and so you get to meet a lot of different people and experience a lot of different incidents, I guess you could say. We've got 14 different fire divisions, around 130 firefighters, and it's a big county. But I think we're one of the larger fire districts in the state, and I'm the only paid employee. The rest of everybody else is completely volunteer. In my wildland travels, I've been places where when a large fire approaches, everybody just moves out and the government moves in, and here you call the neighbors, and the neighbors come and help, and I really enjoy that aspect of it, and I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to do more with that and see it grow and see it perpetuate. Around here, there's a lot of neighbors that are willing to help, and I think that's really neat, and it's something I wanted to do.
Glenn found something else he really wanted to do when a business called Home Sundry came up for sale nearby in the small town of Hamilton.
Well, my wife and I purchased what's called the drugstore in Hamilton, Home Sundry, and it's just a little cafe. That cafe has been there for many, many years. Hazel Holmes started that in, I believe, 1952, and it has been in business ever since as Home Sundry. It sold about a year ago, a little over a year ago, and my wife and I decided to buy it. My wife had been employed by Hill's Pet Nutrition for several years and was pretty involved in the corporate aspect of that and was ready to do something a little more community-oriented. And that drove our decision to buy that, is because for the previous 15 years, we eat lunch in there pretty frequently and had pretty frequently. Our cowboy crew goes in there in the summertime, and that was a community center. I really enjoy driving down that street and seeing the neighborhood in there just being together, and that's important to me, to the community aspect of it. And it had closed for a year or so, and we missed it. I mean, that was really a place to get the news and see the neighbors and just be a part of the community, and that's important to me. That's something that I really enjoy.
One of his neighbors invited Glenn to share some of his views on a podcast called Practically Ranching, hosted and produced by Matt Prairie, who launched it in the spring of 2022.
First one went off pretty well. I got a lot of good comments, and so we took off with it. And it's kind of created a life of its own. It's got a very, very good following, and I get the opportunity to talk with some amazing people within the beef industry in rural America and have some conversations. What I want to do is get people to think and consider an alternative viewpoint. And sometimes everybody nods their head in agreement. Sometimes they hear it and get frustrated or mad. But if they get an opportunity to hear why it is a person thinks or acts or does, or an idea or a notion or a program, why it is like it is, maybe they'll consider the next time, instead of just getting mad because it's different, they'll consider, hey, maybe this is where they're coming from. So
Matt doesn't shy away from topics that can be challenging for his listeners, like when he spoke with a research professor from K-State who's been studying the impact of methane emissions from cattle as it relates to climate change.
Ranchers and rural people in general absolutely hate confrontation. And so if we have a reason to think differently than someone else, we just won't say anything quite often. I think when you really can get a rancher to come out and talk about climate change is when we blame something like a ruminant as one of the drivers of climate change. Then stuff gets Western. And I think rightly so, because even though we've done a terrible job as an industry sharing that story that, hey, bison have maybe been replaced by cattle, but there's still equal or very close to equal numbers of ruminants on the earth, maybe fewer ruminants today than there were before, our culture came into it in the 1800s. And so, climate change would be one of those that we probably just get pretty quiet on. Getting back to the podcast, it's why I started the podcast, is because there are so many nuanced conversations that we would like as a society to just be black or white. I want it all natural because that's better for the environment. Well, actually, it's not. It's just the opposite. And so here's why. And sometimes it takes an hour or so to have that conversation and understand that. So, but the climate change one is one that, regardless of where you live or what side of the aisle you're on, can be a very, very nuanced one. And I think in ranching circles, it's all the more nuanced.
That methane is produced
While
as a
scientists
byproduct.
like Logan Thompson explore how the heat-trapping methane produced in the digestive process of cattle might be reduced, He notes that it's important to consider the value of maintaining viable ranching operations on the grasslands, which seems quite apparent to Matt Perrier.
It's the only way that I have seen. I mean, having ranchers manage these grazing lands, and these, especially the native grass here through the Flint Hills, but really any kind of forage, it's the only way that I have seen that can be an economically sustainable model and keep it from either being plowed under and turned into a crop ground or allowed to just have this wilderness of forest come across it and it be, you know, of very little use to anybody. It's one of the few models that I've seen that keeps the grass as grass and keeps rural communities alive.
It's hard for me to believe this will be 100 years for the Cattlemen. That was just the one weekend. Hey, that was Cattlemen's weekend. Everybody was going to come to it.
The first Saturday in November is pretty well put on your calendar that you know what you're going to be doing that day.
Growing up, Cattlemen's Day is like a holiday. Growing up, I didn't realize that Cattlemen's Day wasn't something that everybody did. You know, when you move away and then you're like, oh, it's November, it's time for Cattlemen's Day.
We never had to work on Cattlemen's Day.
Because I remember growing up with going to Cattlemen's Day, and as soon as I graduated college and moved back, we became involved also.
Something I've always been around. We go to the first weekend of November. That's what you do.
It's such a rich history of the Cattlemen's Association that it's really special to just be a part of it and spend the day. When we have Cattlemen's Day in the fall, it's just really special to be there and think about, you know, how this all started.
Stand around drinking a cold one, and everybody will start telling stories. Remember when, remember so-and-so. You know, and it's just one story right after the other.
My dad was president one time. I was president. My sons already went through the president job. And I think one of my grandsons will be someday.
Greenwood County is a pretty big county, so if you live on the south end and your friends live on the north end or whatever, you might not see people very often, and so getting everybody together in one big room is pretty fun.
And it's also a good way for our local cattlemen to get together. Some of them I only see once a year.
So cool to have an organization that's 100 years. Nothing that I could think of that is better to celebrate than people coming together to feed the world.
I'm going to go ahead and introduce the board. All the stuff that happened today and throughout this event is all because of these guys.
The Greenwood County Cattlewomen also have a long history of service to our ranching community and to Greenwood County as a whole.
Thank you all for your continued support of the Cattlemen and the Cattlewomen, and have a wonderful evening.
Does anybody have any particular thing that you say down in this neck of the woods when you are celebrating such a momentous event?
Folks from Santa Fe, Missouri Pacific, and bringing carloads and carloads of those 2-year-old Texas kids.
What will the next century bring for the ranch families who live out here? And how will the landscape change? Those are questions worth pondering. As one of the ranchers told me, it's often what we don't see coming that's the hardest to deal with. Thanks for joining us. See you next time.
The Flint Hills don't take your breath away. The Flint Hills give you a chance to breathe. You can relax here.
This program is brought to you in part through a grant from Humanities Kansas. Humanities Kansas connects Kansans with stories, ideas, and each other to strengthen our communities. Additional funding has been provided by Richard Porter and Porter Cattle Company, and by SEK Co-op, the Nature Conservancy in Kansas, and these family-owned ranching operations based in Greenwood County, Kansas.